Why does one vote, like, why does my vote matter? So why does one vote matter?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, people are thinking, why should I go to all the effort? There are millions of people out there.
Yeah.
There's one vote, doesn't make a difference. Your vote matters because New Zealand's a small place. There are these close races where 1 or 2 votes, 9 or 10 votes does make a difference. But it matters in another way. And that's because of the system of elections that we have, where votes are going into this big pool of votes, which is going to be basically divvying up the seats, and every vote goes into that calculation.
Cheers, bro. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Webway. Got a special guest on today. I've actually had him on before during quarantine catch-ups. When obviously we're at home, we couldn't, get into the studio, aka garage. But yeah, good to have you in today, bro. For people that don't know who you are, do you sort of just want to say who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you, man. And good to be back on. It seems like years ago,
bro,
a long time ago. So for those that didn't listen to the first one, my name's Chris McIntyre. I am one of the co-founders of Policy.nz. It's an election tool that you can use to get informed about the election, and today we'll be talking about the election, about the different policies, and about voting in general.
Yeah. So, the reason for this podcast is going to be a little bit different than usual, but me personally, I find it hard to get sort of resources to know who to vote for. Not necessarily how to vote, because voting's bloody easy, because you just go and fucking vote. But in terms of deciding who to vote for, I find quite difficult, comparing, the different people and whatnot. So I think that's going to be really beneficial. And what I'm sort of going to do is just a straight Q&A. So I'm going to I put on Instagram a Q&A and got a whole bunch of questions. As I was saying to the boys before, a few of them a bit marginal, but most of them were pretty good. And then we're going to just fire them away at Chris. So just to start off really, I guess broadly, so we get 4 votes this year. Do you want to sort of break down what each one is?
Yeah, no, totally. So in a normal election, right, you get 2 votes. You get the vote for who you want to be in government.
Yeah.
We call that the party vote. And you get the vote for who you want to represent your local area.
Yeah.
And we call that the electorate vote.
Yeah.
And that goes into determining who goes into parliament, who's the government, so on and so on. And we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But this election, there's also 2 referendums. And referendums are basically like a poll of the whole country, right, on a particular issue. And I'm sure, as many of the listeners know, this year it's cannabis, and it's another referendum called end-of-life choice, which is around euthanasia laws.
Yeah.
And so this year, 4 votes, 2 for the government, and then 1 on each of the referendums.
Sweet. It breaks it down really, really easy, and it's a good way to put it. Because I say it's difficult. You see all the stuff online, but it's really hard. Some of them are biased, some of them are not. Your mates are sharing them. You're like, what do I actually know? And it's good to get someone like you on, bro, so I appreciate it. Another question that came up really often actually is, why does one vote, why does my vote matter? So why does one vote matter?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, people are thinking, why should I go to all the effort? There are millions of people out there.
Yeah.
There's one vote, doesn't make a difference. Back in 2011, there was a electorate result in Auckland. I think it was in Waitakere.
Yeah.
Where it was so close they had to go do a recount.
Shit.
9 votes in it.
In what, 2011?
I think it was 2011.
Holy shit.
And I think it was Paula Bennett, I think was her seat. And they went to the recount and she won by 9 votes. Now, I'm sure that listeners could go out and find 10 mates to go out and vote together. And that could swing an election, right? So your vote matters because New Zealand's a small place. There are these close races where 1 or 2 votes, 9 or 10 votes does make a difference. But it matters in another way. And that's because of the system of elections that we have, where for the party votes, so you'll vote for who you want to be the government, if the party that gets 50% of those votes gets 50% of the seats in parliament.
Shit.
They get 51% of the votes, they get 51% of the seats. And we call that like a proportional system.
Yeah.
So your vote might be the one that ticks them from 50.49 to 50.5. And it might make the difference between being one or 2 seats or something like that.
Fuck.
So it might seem, 1 vote, small, doesn't matter, but practically we know that some elections are called by like this much, but we also know that regardless, your vote's going into this big pool of votes, which is going to be basically divvying up the seats, and every vote goes into that calculation.
Shit, man. That really puts it into perspective. 9, bro, that's like an Otago flat down south, bro. 9 a year. Just fucking get out and vote. Doesn't matter who you vote for, hey? Just go do it. Do you know what I mean?
And, you know, last election, I think it was 750,000 people didn't vote.
Fucking hell.
You know, that's a huge number of people, right? And
Mind my French, but that's out the gate.
That's a lot, right?
That's out the gate. 750,000. That actually brings me to my next question. So, when you say, you know, 750,000 people don't vote, what I find, just not in my mates, but, you know, young people tend not to vote, bro. And I think on social media this year, it's been really good because there's been a lot of sort of, you know, posts circling around the percentage of people that don't vote. Why do you think it is that young people don't vote?
Yeah, well, there's research on this, right? So the Electoral Commission, who run New Zealand's elections, they look at our turnout rates, which are about 70-something%.
Yeah.
And they say, why is that not 100? And so they go and ask people, why didn't you vote?
Yeah.
And of the people that didn't vote, do you want to guess how many, what proportion didn't vote simply because they didn't know who to vote for?
Oh, shit. Put me on the spot here, Christopher. Oh, man, I don't know, 30%?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
there you go.
I already knew that. Nah, jokes.
Yeah, maybe we covered it in the last one.
That's crazy.
So 1 in 3 people, that don't vote, their main reason is not knowing who to vote for.
Who to vote for.
And that's a pretty easy thing to fix, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons we started policy.nz, is because that's hundreds of thousands of people out there who the only reason or the main reason is not knowing who to vote for. It's pretty easy to give people information about what their options are.
Yeah.
And I think there's a second reason, which is that parties are not always speaking to the concerns that young people have. And if you look at what's on the agendas, a lot of the parties, a lot of it is suited towards older people, people that own houses,
yes,
people that, you know, have jobs or are retired, and parties can afford to do that because like 50% of young people don't vote. And so if you think, well, 50% of them are not voting, they're not going to make policies that address the concerns of those groups. And so it's not just about knowing who to vote for, but it's also getting involved in politics in other ways, you know,
yeah,
going out there and whether it's just posting on social media about the stuff that you care about, whether it's going on marches, getting involved in organizations that advocate for stuff that you care about,
yeah,
is really important because, you know, it shows the parties that there is an interest group, young people,
yeah,
who have these preferences,
yeah,
and there are votes on the line, they'll respond to that.
100%. That's, yeah, it's a good way to put it. Also, so you're talking about policy.nz, you know, co-founder of that. And I know there's a lot of other sort of tools out there, but they're a lot, I wouldn't say they're different, but I find your one really, really easy. Can you explain some of the differences between yours and other ones? Like, for example, I went online, this was probably about 6 weeks ago, and I think it's just one of the general ones, and yeah, they sort of fill out a questionnaire, and it's quite broad. So what are the bigger differences?
Yeah, so there are a few different tools out there, and if there are 2 websites that I'd encourage people to go to if they want to get, you know, trustworthy election information.
Yeah.
The first is vote.nz, and that is the government's official website about the election.
Yeah.
How to vote, where to vote, you know, check if you're enrolled.
Yeah.
And that's a no-brainer. You know, go and make sure you actually can vote and learn how to do it, and where, you know, your local school, your local church, where the polling place is going to be. And the second, you know, biased here, but my website, our website, policy.nz, and that's going to tell you information about to help inform your choice about who you should vote for. All of the policies are on there, announced by the parties,
yeah,
organized by issue.
Yes.
So you can go if you care about housing, if you care about sports and recreation, if you care about healthcare or education, you can go and see, what are the parties actually going to do in those areas?
Yeah, and you just search it, don't you?
Yeah, you can just choose a site,
yeah, choose
a section of the site, and it's all there. And you can favorite the ones that you like. You can view it totally blind. So if you don't know who you vote for, maybe you've got some biases, or you just want to click a button, takes away all the party names, you just see the policies, and then you can do the big reveal at the end. But you can also, you know, chuck in your address, and you can see who's standing for your local seat.
Yeah.
So what's your electorate? Do you know your electorate?
No, I don't.
So I think that out here we're probably in Rongotai.
Yes.
Chuck in your address or choose Rongotai, and you can see, I think there are like 8 or 9 people running in Rongotai. You know, what are their priorities?
Yeah.
What are they going to do for their area?
Yes.
Who are they? What did they do before politics? We
Yeah.
went out and we talked to all of those candidates around the country, surveyed them. There's like 600.
Shit.
Total nightmare to do it. And you meet some interesting people. But as a result, you can go and find out, you know, what's someone going to do about the things in your neighborhood. So vote.nz, figuring out how to vote, are you enrolled, etc. Policy.nz, figuring out what should you do with your vote, who should you vote for.
Yeah, that's really cool. And by my response, I'm actually telling everyone how it is. I don't really know who to vote for, why to vote for them, and that sort of, with my answer, you can sort of tell, So I'm actually happy you asked me that question.
And policy, like the policy information shouldn't be the only thing that informs people's votes, right? Like there's what are the parties going to do if they get into power? But then it's so unpredictable, man. Like what happens when a government is in power is also about who they are as people. Do you trust them to be making decisions? No one at the last election had a policy on the Christchurch massacre or COVID or all these totally unexpected things that happened.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a whole lot of things where you're not going to be able to have a policy, but you're going to have to take into account, who do you trust to be making decisions that look out for people like you?
Shit, that's a really good way to put it.
Who do you trust to be making decisions in unpredictable environments? And it's, some of that you can figure out from the policies. Some of that you just have to, have a think for yourself about, do you trust these people? Do you like the way that they see the world? Yeah.
It's almost like you got to pick a leader. Obviously, you got to like their bill. I mean, what they stand for and stuff. But you're right. So much unexpected shit happens. So you got to pick someone that you trust, and and those situations will lead us the right way. Weeds come up obviously huge within this election. It's fucking everywhere. Big question that came up was, will weed be legal if referendum passes?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And because the answer is a little bit more complicated than that. We have these two referendums, and they're both slightly different. And I'll talk about weed in a moment. But on the end of life choice referendum, the law has already been passed.
Yeah.
It will only come into effect if the referendum wins. So if the referendum wins immediately, or it might not be immediately, but very soon after, that becomes law of the land, and people with terminal illness can access assisted dying services. With weed, it's a little bit different. The bill hasn't been passed. It's been drafted, and it's sitting there. You can go and read it, and you can see what the people drafting that bill thought would be a good way to regulate and control the licensing and use of cannabis.
Yeah.
But if the referendum passes, whoever wins the next election has to go in and introduce that bill into Parliament, and then it has to go through the normal process and get voted on. Now, some of the parties have said that they won't introduce the bill, even if the referendum passes.
Do you know who those parties are, by the way?
Well, you can go on policy.nz.
Plug.
You can go on policy.nz, and we will have a breakdown of which parties have said, yes, we will definitely support this, which parties have said, no, we won't support it, and so on.
And by the way, sorry, just real quick, policy.nz is a really, really good read. I don't read it all. I mean, I've had to say that. I do read, obviously, when I need to read, but I'm not one to go pick up a book every night sort of thing. But it is a really easy read, so go check it out.
Yeah, and we've tried to make it super accessible to people really familiar with politics. You have so much detail there, but only if you're clicking and asking for it. If you're coming in as a first-time voter or someone that's less comfortable or familiar with the issues, totally fine. We try and make it really simple. And what we do is we take out all of the parties' spin. They try and put a spin on things, and they try and present it to sound really positive in a way that they think people will like. We try and strip that back and just say, look, what are you actually doing? So that you don't get swept up in their kind of, the
bias ways.
Bias and spin and so on.
Yeah.
And so far, about 1 in 11 voters have used it.
Shit.
And so, a lot of people are out there reading this and finding it a useful tool.
Yeah. Do you know sort of the age bracket of those? Is it mostly young, mostly?
That's a good question. I'd imagine that it's mostly young.
Yeah.
But honest answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
The reason for that is we try to collect as little information as is possible to operate the website, because these are real personal choices that people are making. They're saving policies they like.
Sure.
You think about the last election, the way that Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, all these big scary things became big issues. We're trying to say, look, this is just for you guys. We're not going to sell your data. We're not going to use this as a surreptitious polling service and sell your results to people. Or just the information is there. You can go look at it.
Cool. That's really cool, and it's good to have like a non-bias. Because I was saying before, like you go online, you're right. People do spin things a certain way, and you know what social media is like. You get in a bloody dark hole, and you just go and you look, and you're like, oh my god, and you share on your story without actually doing the actual research. bumfa, you're voting for someone you don't want to vote for.
Yeah, and there were some stories that came out. Joe, I know you got a bit of a following out there online, and there were some stories that came out about influencers sharing just straight up misinformation, and in some cases don't even realize. It's a mate or of a mate. And so, we have been trying to work with influencers and encouraging influencers out there to share policy.nz, because whether you want to stay neutral and just say, look, here's a trustworthy source of information, go inform your vote, or if you want to take a position and say, these are the party's policies I really like, you should vote for them. If you want to say, I'm really supporting candidate such and such who's standing in my local area, here's their profile. You can get involved in a neutral way or in a kind of a politically motivated way.
Yeah.
But you're not sharing, conspiracies.
Yeah. Some of them are out the gate. Yeah, some of them are out the gate. Another quick question that came out quite a bit was, what do you get for your vote?
Ooh, what do you get? Well, I guess there's a few ways to look at that, right?
There is.
Yeah.
It's quite a broad question.
In the most simple terms, you have these two votes. You have a vote for your local person, and whoever wins your local seat, whoever gets the most votes, they get a seat in Parliament. And so you have a say in who do you want to represent your local area, and they have a seat in Parliament. And you're probably, I think it's in Kilburney, is the MP for Rongotai, that's their office.
Yes.
Go down there, you can go meet with them and you can chat with them about your issues. If you need a hand accessing any services or whatever, they're there and they're available. And so that's an important one, right? Because you never know when you might need to call on help from government.
For sure.
And so that's what one of your votes gets you, is someone that looks out for your interests. And they're super accessible. I think for most electorates, you could just go make an appointment with them.
That's crazy, bro. I didn't even know that. So if you say you've got an issue, okay, this is going to probably sound stupid, but you got a pothole on your road and it's on your fucking head in, you can just walk down, you can obviously book a meeting, not pothole, but you know what I mean. You book a meeting and you can actually say, hey, this pothole's pissing me off. Can we do something about it? And I guess you also, with the local vote, that's actually really important, because you might be living there for 20 years, 30 years, it's your family. Do you know what I mean? It's actually really important.
Yeah, totally. And what they might do in that instance is, they'll listen to your concern. And I think, like for potholes, for example, that might be like a Wellington City Council. And so they might say, as the local MP for such and such, City Council, you need to sort this out. You've got someone with a bit of power advocating for your issue.
Yeah.
Or it might be, in COVID times, a lot of people had family members stuck overseas. They might write to their local member to say, could you please advocate for my case with the Minister of Immigration? And there are all sorts of different ways that they will advocate for you. It's not just, going down to the local prize givings, going to the veggie fair and things like that. So that's one way in which your vote is what you get for your vote.
Yeah.
And then the other is for your party vote, you get the government that you want, or hopefully you get your say in who gets to form the government.
Yeah.
And whether they enact the policies that you hope they will after the election. Democracy is not just election time.
No.
Democracy happens all the time.
Exactly.
Democracy is being engaged in issues, it's advocating for things, it's talking to your mates, you're talking to your family, getting them to go vote for things. If you feel really strongly on stuff, you can go down to Parliament, and any bill that's going through, you can go and talk to the MPs that are going to decide on that bill. You can make a submission and say, this is what I think about it. That's democracy as well. So it doesn't just finish with your party vote. What you get for your vote is a Parliament that reflects what people want at election time. But it's not just, doesn't happen every 3 years, Every day you have an opportunity to engage in the democratic process in different ways.
That's super accessible, You make it sound really, really easy to just sort of get in contact about bills, to your local MP.
Yeah, it is, right? And I think it's a blessing and a curse in New Zealand is that, we have things are pretty stable here. People, for the most part, happy to go on about their lives and not pay too much attention to politics because by and large things are okay for a lot of people or things keep ticking over. But if you want to pay attention to something, the benefit of being in New Zealand is a small country, you can be right there in a way that other countries can't because the scale is so big.
You got more of a say, I guess.
And the other day I was filling up my car and the Minister of Finance was filling up the car right next to him. You'd have it standing behind me in the line waiting to pay. You'd never have that in many countries, and I wasn't going to go bother him on his Sunday. But
I thought you would have, bro, to be honest.
What am I going to say?
Yeah, true.
He's on his day off.
Yeah,
fair
true.
Enough.
Probably not even a day off for him either.
Well, no, exactly. But the point being, New Zealanders' democracy, the whole democratic process is so accessible and there are lots of different ways that you can get involved, and I think people should get involved if it's stuff they care about.
Yeah, for sure. This question came up a lot as well about the MMP system. So how does the MMP system work?
Yeah, so that's basically what we've been talking about with like having your 2 votes, one for the local person, one for the party. And the beauty of the MMP system, so it stands for Mixed Member Proportional. So proportional refers to the party vote, being that if 50% of the party get 50% of the votes, they get 50% of the seats. So Parliament is proportional to the party vote results. Mixed member refers to kind of the complicated process that they make sure that both whoever you elect for your local area, they get into Parliament. And so about 2/3 of the people in Parliament come from local areas.
Yeah.
And then the other third of people in Parliament come from the parties to make sure that it's proportional to the party vote, basically.
Okay.
Now, there's a whole lot of complicated maths involved in that, but that's basically the system. And I think it's a really, really good one. It's not perfect, but if you compare it to other places around the world, if you look at the US, for example, Donald Trump was able to win the presidency without a popular majority. So more people voted for Hillary Clinton. But their system is not proportional.
State by state, isn't it?
Yeah, state by state. And so what you can have in those situations, and it's not just the US, there are a number of countries that don't have proportional systems, the UK, for example. What you have in those systems is a government which doesn't necessarily reflect the democratic majority of what people want. But MMP ensures that Parliament, at least, is made up in the proportion that people voted for them.
I think that's good as well, because things like Donald Trump can't become president.
Well, and we voted, we used to have a system a little bit more like the UK system.
Oh, yeah?
So if you won your local area, you went to Parliament.
Shit.
And there was no party vote. It was like just people being elected from their local area.
Popularity contest.
Well, what happened, right? Imagine that every electorate was 51% to the Apples party and 49% to the Oranges party. You would have the Parliament being 100% Apples and 0% Oranges.
Shit.
And that's an extreme example, but like that's how it ended up in a minority of people having a majority of the seats in Parliament and being able to basically do what they wanted. And New Zealand said, this is not what we want. There was a referendum on whether we should have the old system or MMP. That was back in 96. And we said, or 1996, we said actually we wanted to have a go at this proportional system. And then back in 2011, we had another referendum. Should we keep it? We said, yep, Karpai, let's stick with it. It's working.
That's awesome. You bloody know your dates and your facts, mate. You've obviously done a lot on this, eh? It's amazing, bro. Because just by the way, I said about it in the last podcast, but the way I actually know Chris is we played basketball growing up together. So this guy's not only an absolute fucking genius, he is a baller as well. He's 6 foot. How tall are you? 6 foot?
6'6".
6'6".
6'6". But not so much of a basketball anymore. People have been trying to recruit me to play in the Alpha League and the C League, but I'm past it. I think I'm washed.
We'll just chill with our 4 or 5 championships, bro. Chill out.
Exactly.
So a lot also another question that came up quite a lot is to do with the small parties. So do the small parties have any chance of getting in government?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think it's a really important one because it's the one exception to the rule of being a proportional system. So you know how I was saying that if a party gets 50% of the votes, they get 50% of the seats in Parliament.
Yes,
that's true. If a party has to get at least 5% of the votes in order to qualify. So if you get 5% of the votes, you get 5% of the seats.
Oh, okay.
If you get 4.9% of the votes, done. Unless you win a seat, like a local seat.
Yeah.
That's okay. So the ACT Party, for example, they have one person in Parliament at the moment because he won the electorate of Epsom in Auckland, but they got like 1% of the vote. And so he's in Parliament because he won a seat, but there were parties that got 2-3% of the vote that aren't in Parliament because they didn't hit that threshold.
Shit.
And so that's just a trade-off that people make when they're designing the system to say, well, we don't want to have lots of tiny parties. There'll just be a hassle having all these single-person parties. Would they have an outsized amount of influence, et cetera, et cetera. But right now the threshold is 5%. In other countries, it's like 1 or 2%. There's been some reviews in New Zealand that say 3%. And so at the moment, it's quite hard for small parties to get into parliament because it's quite hard to win a seat off one of the big parties. It's also quite hard to hit 5%. And so dropping that threshold would make it easier. But, you know, we have the system that we have.
So, because I guess most of the followers that I have especially are young, when I did the Q&A, there was quite a lot to do with young people. So this might be quite broad, but I'm going to ask anyway. So what party is helping young people? So like in terms of, you know, buying houses and like student loan repayments and whatnot, from your understanding?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that question, I think just going back to, you know, you've had a lot of questions about young people. I just want to say it's amazing the number of questions that you had when we were chatting about this before, you know, hundreds.
Yeah.
And to me, that's awesome. It's like people are thirsty for information about the election, and people also with a following can be a vessel for that information. And so I think, you know, for everyone out there that's listening that does have a platform, it can be really powerful if you starting conversations about the election, sharing information, sharing tools like policy.nz.
Yeah, plug. Let's go.
But, you know, people out there want to know, and they want to know in accessible ways, and
for sure.
people that they trust. So, you know, you had hundreds of questions about all sorts of things, some of them about young people, but I just think it's great that people are engaged.
Interested. Yeah. And I mean, politics is a quite in-depth, how do I say it? It's not the easiest thing to understand, you know, if you don't, you know, do it every day like yourself. So I think making it as easy as possible, as accessible as possible, is really important. Yeah,
and I think I want to answer that question about that you asked before, but while we're on this thread, like something that's really important, I think, for people to understand is that the things that they experience, like things that you experience in your life, rent, house prices, healthcare, the quality of schools, to a large extent, those are political choices that successive governments have made. And your election is your chance to decide who gets to make those choices. You know, you can look at house prices in New Zealand, you know, off the charts. Incomes have gone like this, house prices have gone like this. And so for our generation, it's harder than ever to afford a house. You know, Wellington house prices are like a similar level of, you know, similarly expensive if you look at average incomes to some of the most expensive cities in the world.
It's ridiculous.
But it's a result of successive political choices. And if you look at tertiary education, people have big student loans. People didn't used to have student loans. There was a political choice to put fees. And then more recently, there was a choice to take fees off for the first year. When you start to make that connection, that the things in your life that you think are good or bad are actually intimately linked to government choices, then you realize you got skin in the game.
Yes. That's a really good way of putting it, bro. And that also goes back to the question, does your vote matter? Yes, it does matter if you care about those things, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But go back to that question about young people vote. Who should young people vote for?
So what party is helping young people? So in terms of, is there house pricing?
Yeah, so
etc.
I would encourage young people looking for a party that speaks to them to go to policy.nz.
Yeah.
I don't want to be telling people who I think they should vote for, and I think young people have a wide range of interests. You know, young people are often lumped together as one group, but I'm sure that you and I would disagree strongly on different political issues. I'm sure that any two young people you put together in the same room don't think that young people are just like one group.
Oh, bro, just on that, I was in a meeting this morning, came out of it, and it was people talking about the upcoming election, and people were going at it, and I literally just left, bro. I was like, I can't fucking do this, eh? So you're right, young people do, they all don't get on with the same sort of way. It's just, it's fucking crazy that way, bro. The amount of, like, literally, they were like this across the table, and I was like, Jesus, mate. It's good though.
Yeah, but well, people should be having these conversations, right? It's part of the democratic process. It doesn't just, people don't just make their decisions in a vacuum. People make it as in response to conversations,
for sure,
and to talking to friends and family and to hashing out the issues. But who should young people vote for? Well, I think young people should look at who are the parties that will serve their interests. And you raise a few issues: renting, house prices, tertiary education, university support. There'll be others which are important to young people, but you should go and look at what are the parties doing for me. My personal view is that parties generally aren't doing very much for young people, in part because young people don't vote, and most people that vote already own properties, already went to university or paid back their student loans, aren't going to be alive when we're having hurricanes and forest fires and droughts from climate change. And so I don't think that there is any single one party speaking to young people's issues. I think there are parties which are better on specific issues. But the more young people that get engaged in the political process realize that politics is making choices about the way that society is organized, then I think you have more people listening to, or more parties having issues that are speaking to young people.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I was going to ask people, this is probably the second most asked question was, where can people find resources? But I think we sort of touched on that, policy.nz and vote.nz.
Vote.nz, that's election information. Policy.nz, that's information about, who should you vote for?
Yeah.
Or to help you make up your own mind.
Yeah, for sure. And as I say, guys, it's really, really, really easy. Because if I can fucking do it, you guys can. So what happens after the election to form a government?
Oh, good one. So in New Zealand, right, you have Parliament, which is, you do your party vote, that decides who gets the seats in Parliament. And Parliament as a whole, they get to make the laws. But you also have a body called the government, which is who gets to make the decisions.
Yes.
And the technical terms for those, you have an executive, just like on in a company, you have an executive that make the decisions, and you have a legislature who make the legislation, the laws. So Parliament's the legislature, and that's what your party vote does, is basically puts allocates the seats to the different parties.
Yeah.
Now, to form a government, to get to make the decisions, you have to have a majority of Parliament.
Yes.
So 50% plus one. So that means basically 61 seats in New Zealand. So if at the election one party has 61 seats, they will be the only party that can form the government. And now they go to the Governor General. Yeah. That's like our head of state. Yes. Queen's representative. Yeah. Because Queen's still the head of state. So in law, if not, she doesn't really go meddling in the affairs, but on paper. She is. And so the party with the vote, with the number of seats, 61, will go and say, we've got enough seats to make a government. And she'll say, go ahead. Yeah. Now, if you don't have 61 seats, let's say you have 59 seats, you need to go find 2 more seats to work with you. And so that's what we call a coalition. So under the National Party government, John Key, you had National, you had ACT, and you had the Māori Party. And they would work together and they would say, look, we're not going to agree on everything, but on the big stuff, like spending money, like on major policies, we're all going to vote together so that we have majority, and we'll form the government. At the moment, it's Labour, the Greens, and New Zealand First. And so that's another kind of blessing and a curse of MMP, of this proportional system, is that it's not like in the US where someone just wins and they get all the power. Yes. The system was designed to make it difficult for any one person to have power, so that different parties have to come together and compromise. Fucking hell, man. It's a buzzy system, bro. You're really good at explaining it. You're really, honestly, bro, you are really good at explaining it. And I'm hoping everyone can sort of get what I'm getting. So I've learned already in the last half an hour more than I've ever learned. It's good to hear. And it is a complicated system. And this is the high level version as well. There's a whole lot of maths. There's other stuff that goes on. There's thresholds and blah, 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 blah. But I think the important thing to understand is that the fundamentals are strong. Yeah. The parties that get the votes, that's reflected in who's the government. Yeah. You get to choose who you represent in your local area. Yes. They go to advocate for your interests. Yeah. Those are really important features, and those are not features that you have in many other countries. Yeah. I was reading an article today which was talking about, the US electoral system has been the same for 200 years. Fuck. And, the US goes around the world, they try to spread democracy, and they will advise other countries to implement a system like New Zealand's.
Yes.
So we're very, in many respects, cracked it. We're very lucky.
Yeah.
And there are things you could do to make it better. But, it's complicated, but I think it leads to pretty good results.
For sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the debates. So what are your thoughts on the whole debate, I guess, in terms of the structure of it? And because, obviously the Joe Biden, Donald Trump one happened, and that was fucking like two little kids in the playground. But the one with Jacinda and, so what do you think about that whole approach and I guess the way that happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth on it. Did you watch either of the debates yesterday?
I watched the first one.
The first one. Did you find it useful?
Not really.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of people watch it as like theatre. It's like a TV show.
It is, bro. It's exactly. I wanted to say that, but I thought that was a bit too harsh. But I'm actually happy you said that because it was like that.
And I think if you look at the way that the debates are talked about, it's like a boxing match. It's like who scored the points.
Oh my God.
Who had a response for this? Who called who? The name. Like that kind of stuff. I don't think lends to people understanding the issues more. And if you look at how, like in the US, CNN cover these debates, it's like a boxing match. It's like UFC or something, and it's all about like who's going to land the biggest hit and who
taps out first. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And then you look at the commentary afterwards, and it's about who won. But that's totally disconnected from what are they going to do
and what actually matters.
Government. What are they going to do? What's their vision for the country? And so I was a little bit disappointed watching last night's debate. I didn't think it was particularly informative or insightful for two reasons. One being, again, it was just about kind of trying to score points.
Yeah.
Two, they kind of had the same policies on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you go to the website, you'll see that on some areas, some parties have very few policies. On other areas, there's nothing really, separating the parties.
Yeah.
And I think you heard a lot of agreement in that debate last night.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that, I think those debates produce more heat than light.
Definitely. And you're right. It's just it's definitely for our entertainment. And I think we were talking about it off air actually. There should be a mute button, especially for the Trump Biden one, because honestly, it's just they're just going over each other, talking. Do you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous.
And there's a old this goes way back, right? To our political system is built on the British political system.
Yes.
And in that system, it's very like adversarial. It's very like A versus B. It's about debate and it's about voting yes or no on things. And our court system is set up the same way. And you have evidence for, you have evidence against, you kind of cross-examine. And again, a very like adversarial system where it pits one against another. And that's not the only way to run a country. If you look at like traditional Māori ways of governance, it was around consensus. It was around people getting around, talking, hashing it out until they could come to a collective view on something.
Yes.
And the kind of political system that we have today runs on a particular model, but there's no reason that we need to have debates. It's not the only way to make decisions. It's not the only way to evaluate our leaders.
Has that always happened, like debates like that?
Yeah, I don't have a historical answer, but I think it's been a feature of like Western political systems for a really, really long time.
Yeah. Because they can sway votes massively. Do you know what I mean? Like if if Judith Collins got on Jacinda's ass about a few things and I don't know, she just picked it and Jacinda couldn't handle it, that would be fucking huge, for the voting, and it doesn't actually reflect on what actually matters at the end of the day, so it's almost like, I'm totally against it, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie, I'm totally against that. There should be a better way of doing it, but do you know what I mean? Like it can definitely sway votes hugely.
Like I think that there's some value in it because you get to see these people under pressure, and there's not much room to hide up there, with the interviewer or the moderator drilling you with the other, and you want people to be able to speak to their ideas credibly. You want them to be able to perform under pressure, and you'll see that, like, when you look at the job of being a prime minister, it's a really tough job, and you want to make sure people are up to it. So there is some value in it. But in terms of helping people make up their minds, I think that debates should be just one part of a broader set of institutions that involve people more. Instead of watching it on TV, get people down to the town hall, having discussions, asking questions.
Yeah.
Instead of just talking about the leaders, it's like the leaders aren't responsible for that much.
Yeah.
They have all their ministers as well. There was a finance debate, I think last week or 2 weeks ago down in Queenstown, where the finance ministers or the finance minister and the finance spokespeople from the other party chatted about finance stuff. why don't we do the same thing for, for climate change policy, for environment, for all those different areas, and lift that up? Because those are the people who will be making decisions in those areas.
Exactly.
And those are things that people care about.
Yeah, and what you say about being under pressure, though, it does put Jacinda and Judith under pressure, but government isn't just one person, you know what I mean? If you think about it, it's a really, really hard job being Prime Minister, but you do have people around you that you talk to and you discuss before you come out and say something, So I think it is cool seeing them on their back foot a little bit, but that's not really what it's like in real life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they have a whole team there, and they're briefing documents. They've got the whole public service.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of people helping the government make good decisions. And while there are some unique qualities that I think a good leader or prime minister or minister needs, there are other ways to look at it.
Yeah. Last thing I want to talk about, obviously, we spoke about, if weed will be legal. Will weed be legal if the referendum passes? Is there anything else that you sort of want to discuss in regards with weed? Because as I say, it's been a very, very big part of, I guess, what I've seen on social media anyway. Yeah. Do you want to go into anything around that more that we've spoken to, or you think you're all good?
No, let's talk about that. And, on this one, I think, on both the referendums, actually, I think there's been a lot of scaremongering out there on the no votes, both for end-of-life choice and for the cannabis referendum. And I don't think that the debate has been a really good one around what it would actually mean. And so I'd encourage people to get out there and to really read up on these issues. For me, I'll be voting yes on both. I think that the right to die with dignity if you have a terminal illness is really important. And I think that if you look at the way that the law is written, the people, to get the right to die, the conditions are incredibly strict. And when you look at other countries that have done it, which is always a good test, we're trying, both of these things have been tried in other countries, how did it go?
Yeah.
A lot of the concerns being run by the No campaign on right to die haven't really played out. And I agree it's something we need to be really, really careful about. For sure. Because it's people's lives, and there is a risk that decisions are made in a way which leads people to feeling pressured or otherwise. But I think that if we look at the experience of other countries, it hasn't been the case, and that's something that I'm not seeing cut through.
I see what you're saying. So basically, other countries have done it and been successful somewhat, and you haven't really seen that being portrayed or messaged on social media and online and in debates especially. Yeah,
we're not the first country to have tried either of these things. And if you look at the cannabis control legalization and control bill, that's been tried in other countries as well.
Yeah.
And drug use amongst young people went down. That's not something that we see a lot in the debate. And the debate's almost like, if we vote no on the referendum, then cannabis will magically go away. And it's not going to magically go away. It's going to retain use in the community, and instead of having a health approach, we're going to continue to be putting people in jail unnecessarily. And
Absolutely.
Instead of the money from the taxes on that going to the government, the gangs are going to keep using it to fund themselves.
Yeah.
And so the reason that most of this conversation has been around politics, the electoral system, voting, being informed, and so on. But the reason I think wanted to speak to how I'm voting on both of those is because one of the best ways to get people involved, I think, one, you link people's understanding of problems in their own lives to the political choices that lead to those problems.
Yeah.
Number two, have open conversations with people and put your disagreements out on the table and discuss and agree to disagree if that's where you land. But I'm going to be going and talking to my family about these votes. I'm going to talk to my mates about these votes. And I think it's becomes a better democracy if we can have these conversations and not feel like every part of your vote needs to be private or something that only happens in the ballot box. And if you want to increase youth voting, go have chats to your mates.
Talk about
on election day. Carpool, go down to the voting bill. There are heaps of ways to vote. You can start voting on October the 3rd, I think, by the time this potty drops.
Yeah.
Voting will be open at advanced places.
Yeah.
Take some mates down, go do it, and have some conversations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing around voting, speak for myself, like when I was 18, I didn't know any better. I just sort of voted for who my parents voted for and I didn't know much about it. So I think having a tool like Policy NZ is really cool because I'm not saying who my parents vote for isn't who I vote for, but it's a good way to sort of understand and decide for yourself, you know, because there's not many resources out there that, I don't want to say dumbs it down, but makes it as simple as possible for a Joe average person like Joe Webb to understand. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's been really helpful, bro, and I really appreciate it. Was there anything that you would wanted to cover that we sort of haven't covered and that wasn't asked? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, you did put me on the spot. No, I mean, this has been a really rich conversation. I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
And people are probably bored of hearing about the elections by now. So what I would say to people, remember, get out there, check that you're enrolled, go vote.
Yeah.
Super easy. You've 4 votes. Use them.
Yeah, 100%. You also were mentioning before the show that you're on the project Monday night?
Yeah, so Monday, 5th of October, we're going to be on the project. Also, keep an ear out for us on 9 to noon on Radio New Zealand. We're going to be on the Rocks Drive Show. We're going to be on The Edge. And we really encourage you, if you find policy.nz a useful resource, share it with your mates, share it with your family. Either just say, look, here's somewhere where you can go for trustworthy information. Or if you believe in particular policies, screenshot them, tag us. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Don't have a big following on those places, but that's okay.
But hey, 1 in 10, 1 in 11 people in New Zealand.
People have used us.
That is crazy.
So far, and we're looking at probably 1 in 8, maybe 1 in 7, which is hundreds of thousands of people.
That is crazy, man. Well, firstly, congrats, and I really appreciate it, man, because I've honestly got so much out of this, and I hope the listeners and people get out of it, and I'm sure they will. So once again, bro,
Last thing, I should plug our sponsors.
Yes.
We say thank you very much to Flick Electric Company, who make it possible. We also thank the Google News Initiative, one of our sponsors. We thank Victoria University of Wellington, thank Jenny Sutton and Greenlight Ventures, and we also thank NZIER. And we're publishing partners with the Spin-Off. They've been huge for us. So go check out their members program. We couldn't do it without our supporters. If you find policy useful, there's also a donate button on site. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. Hey, donate, because I don't know if you guys heard, but he said that he went and interviewed every local MP. So that is some mahi, guys. So fucking go donate. I will be. Awesome, bro. Appreciate you, G.
All right. Thanks, Webby.
Cheers, bro.